Good morning, Eastern Oregon. Welcome to EOAlive and this AM on EOAlive, your connection to Eastern Oregon. Glad you're here this morning. We're here today. Going to have Cliff Bentz is going to joining us in here in a few minutes, and glad to have him with us. Kyle Dodsey is still a little under the weather, and so he's not with us today. So it's just me again. But we're really glad that you are here. I think our Facebook is acting up a little bit, and so I don't know that it's dinging the way it's notifying people the way that it should be. But hopefully people will come in as we get going here. So hey, we need to, like always, love to hear you comment and hear how you're doing today. Love to have questions that you might have for Cliff. And so please take the time to do that. This is an opportunity for you to ask a U.S. Congressman a question that is relevant to you. Just keep in mind that, Cliff is our Eastern Oregon, its 2nd congressional district representative. No, that's not correct. Is that right? Okay, thank you, Cliff. I can see him. He ran as a Republican and won that seat, and so then his perspective is from a Republican perspective, and so we've reached out also we're in the process of reaching out to Senator Wyden and Merkley, because I know that whenever we have one of these shows, we'll have people that will say, well, what about the other side? And again, we're always happy to hear from people that will, represent their perspective or both perspectives. Our goal is to not be 50-50, because that's not the split of the people here. It's to be 60-40. Now, that doesn't mean that we're seeking after that exact proportion, but our obligation is to represent our constituency, and that is what mostly is in Eastern Oregon. So, but what I find is that people who represent the other side oftentimes will not have the courage to come on and talk. And so I just would encourage you to do so. If you have someone or if you want to have a civil conversation, then please do that. So I think we have 2 Facebook streams that are going today. And so if you want to be a part of the conversation, I just put a post in the Facebook that says to post here. So find that one where my comment is, and that is where you're going to, that's where you're going to put your comments. So, hey, thank you, Julie, for the comment and let me know you're here. Be sure and share this stream, because it's not every day that we have a chance to talk with a congressman. So, hey, let's take a look at the outdoors. It's a beautiful day out there today, and Gabe's weather is gonna get up to 67 today, and so just what a beautiful fall day. The rain hasn't started yet. I was sitting in the backyard last night and looking at some of the leaves that had fallen, and Tanya and I are preparing for the onslaught of all of those leaves dropping. So today it's going to be up to 67. Then tomorrow it's going to be a little bit warmer. And so that's it. Be sure and watch for Gabe, who drops the extended weather forecast that'll be tomorrow evening, and that gives a kind of a perspective for the weekend and all of next week. So, all righty. Well, hey, let's take a short break, and when we come back, Cliff will join us, and we'll get it started.
EOAlive is your connection to Eastern Oregon. Get the latest and most relevant news in 2 minutes or less with Megan Demersion on our evening news broadcast. We cover Eastern Oregon's weather daily with Gabe, the EOAlive Weather Kid, with an extended forecast every Friday. Watch Dodsey on EOAlive Sports to get the latest sports information and interviews with local coaches, athletes, and more. See Brent and Doddsy goof and gaff with local guests on EOAlive's morning talk show, AM on EOAlive. We're available across the board, including Facebook, YouTube, Amazon Fire, and of course, our very own website, EOAlive.tv. We even have our own Roku channel and 24/7 live streaming via Stream. You can also listen to our shows on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and many other popular podcast apps. You can get everything all in one place with the EOAlive app, available on Android, iOS, and the Amazon App Store. EOAlive, your connection to Eastern Oregon.
All right. So, Cliff, glad you're here with us today. What part of the country are you in right now?
Well, I'm in my home office here about 10 miles outside of Ontario. I've been back for 2 days from having attended the Judiciary Committee markup of its part of the $3.5 trillion bill on Monday. We met for 12 hours, started at 10 in the morning and ended up at midnight, and then caught the 6 o'clock a.m. plane back. But it's great to be back in Oregon, and you're right, it is a beautiful time of the year, and I really appreciate you having me on your show. It's very difficult to share with everybody all of the things that are going on because your time is so taken up. But travel alone is amazing. You can get on the plane, as I did from Portland Sunday night, and flew into DC, arrived at around 1 in the morning, and then was down at the hearing fairly early, and then back again literally the next day. I mean, so but all of that time that you're flying, you're not you're not talking to anybody but yourself. I'll tell you. Yeah. It's great to be on your show.
Well, yeah. Well, and is there a time when, do you sometimes when you get back to Oregon, and probably particularly when you coming down the road and you can see Ontario or where you live, it's like, wow, it's just, you ever have kind of like that breath of like, everything's been tense, and I know how it is. I grew up in Wyoming, and whenever I would get home, at a certain point I could see the lights of home, and it was like, it just had that feeling. I still do. Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. And it's interesting because it takes a while to unwind from the stress that what I told my, I often say, long-suffering wife, Lindsay Norman. She's a veterinarian here in Ontario. And I said, Lindsay, the situation when you're in committee, particularly in judiciary, is the most similar thing to trying a case that I've ever encountered. I've tried a lot of cases as a lawyer, but when you're in judiciary, it's the same. You're on the spot sort of an exercise, and I really do enjoy it. I won't lie, I really do enjoy it, but the stress level is fairly high. So coming home, yeah, you're right. It's like a huge relief, but of course, then you drive back into drought and fire and all of the folks upset about vaccinations, and all the issues never go away, Brent. You're going to be, if you take this job, you better enjoy doing it 24 hours a day, because you are doing it 24 hours a day. So
tell us what is the committee? The process. Give us a little bit of a civics lesson on the process of, so there's this proposal or this bill that is coming, and then, but it sounds like you guys, there's a process by which you can have input into it and adjustment. And is that part of the thing that you're doing right now? Talk a little bit about that so people can understand the day-to-day stuff.
Well, boy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that question. The committee structure in Washington, D.C. is designed so that the party in power has, of course, substantially more members on each committee than the minority party. Even though right now, if we had 4 more votes on the Republican side of the aisle, we would be in charge. It's that close. It's amazingly close. But still, if you go into the Judiciary Committee, There's around 45 people on it. I don't know the exact number. And there are roughly 8 more Democrats than Republicans. So, and I don't quote my numbers. You'd have to go look. It kind of changes a little bit by virtue of people coming and going, in the sense that some people are taken off the committee. Some people don't attend the meetings. I mean, you just never quite know. But you're going to be outnumbered all the time. I mean, they make sure of that, they being the party in power. And so you go into your committee meeting, and now it's a little bit different because many people attend virtually. So they're on a screen up on the wall, broken into squares, just like any Zoom meeting now. And then those of us who take the time to get back to DC sit at the dais. And in the case on Monday, where we spent the 12 hours, we were actually over in the visitor center so that everybody could maintain appropriate distances, even though I think almost everybody, I say almost, I'm going to say 80-90% of people in Congress appear to be vaccinated, but still there's the mask mandate applies unless you're speaking, and then you can take your mask off and speak into the microphone. So the Democrats sit all over on one side and the Republicans sit on the other. And Jim Jordan is our ranking member in the Judiciary. He's become a very good friend. He was very happy I took the time to fly back to DC and participate in person in the meeting. The bill that came before us was our share, the Judiciary Committee's share of the $3.5 trillion bill. So they had allocated $107.5 billion to our committee. The phraseology was basically, you as the Judiciary Committee have the opportunity to increase the deficit by $107.5 billion. And then it was up to that committee, the majority of the committee, to figure out how they wanted to, quote, spend, end quote, that $107.5 billion. The bill that we focused on, that they brought, we had nothing to say about how it was drafted, nothing. And it wasn't really a bill so much as a resolution, if you will, going to the Ways and Means Committee, where they will stack up all of the different resolutions that come in from each of the House committees, and they will then put together the $3.5 trillion bill. And so what happened then is we Republicans didn't get a chance to see this proposal by the Democrats until I believe it was 48 hours. I may be off a few before the meeting started. And so we prepared, and our staff prepared 30 or 40 amendments to it. And then we spent the next 12 hours debating those amendments. And so we would introduce the amendments, and each one of the members of the committee gets 5 minutes, if they choose to use it, their 5 minutes, to talk about the amendment. And so if you got 30 amendments, or 40 or 50, or however many we had, and you also have 45 members, each getting 5 minutes, you can see why it took 12 hours. Actually, we had far more amendments ready to go, but the Democrats decided to cut off debate at midnight, and so they called the question, and at that point they voted the resolution, if you will, out. I'll just share with you, Brent, that the Republicans had almost nothing to do with this bill, and in fact I think nothing is a better word for it, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody got something done, but I doubt it. So this concept of going back and working together, you can throw that out the window when it comes to this bill, and or this 3.5 trillion, because that's not what's happening.
So then the things that you proposed, the amendments that you put forward, none of them really made it through the process. None of them were adopted.
No, and some of them, it's clear why they weren't adopted. I mean, first of all, you have to, let me just share with you what was in the Democrats' proposal of how to spend the money. There were basically just a couple of things in that bill, just a couple. The first one was to throw the door open to immigration. So the first proposal was to say, it was built on the Dreamer bill, the concept being that if you were brought to the United States when you were very young, then you should be not accused of having broken the law. That was the underlying theory. The concept came up a number of years ago, back during the Obama administration. I want to say 8 years ago, that the concept of the Dreamer bill came up. This bill, if you will, or resolution that the Democrats brought, increased the umbrella under which the Dreamers could fit, capturing everybody basically up to January of this year. So if you were brought into the country when you were a younger person, and I'm going to say under 18, but I may be off a bit, then you would fit within the group of people that would become immediately permanent residents, not citizens, but permanent residents. So you would go from an illegal status to a legal status should this bill pass. Now, that was just part of the bill, part of the group of folks. That group of folks is somewhere between 2 and 3 million people. In addition, the proposal by the Democrats also included folks that had worked as, quote, essential workers, end quote, during the 1 year of the COVID crisis, looking back. And work is not yet defined. Exactly what you were doing is not defined, and it lends itself to all kinds of fraud. But the number of people anticipated to fit under that particular umbrella would be around 5 million. So if you add the two together, it's about 8 million people that would become permanent residents of the United States. And so the much of the initial conversation was focused, the whole night was focused on whether this was a good or a bad thing, given the border crisis and given the failure to control the border. The border is completely open right now as far as many are concerned. And then to give amnesty to 8 million people obviously raises all kinds of issues. And we Republicans called these issues out over and over and over again, and we got nowhere. But we did have an opportunity to call out the Biden administration for its failure to address immigration appropriately. And I'm only sad because they're really this was just an exercise in giving us a chance to talk about the bill, which I'm happy to have been able to say, hey, this is not the right way to do immigration. But as far as them accepting anything, no, the Democrats accepted nothing. The bill passed out late at night, right just before midnight, Tuesday morning early, and now it is going to Ways and Means, where it will be added to the rest of the bills that add up to 3.5 trillion.
So then the immigration portion of that, is that a part of what the Judiciary Committee was looking at, or is that that's a part of what you guys were studying and looking at?
Yeah, that's part of the jurisdiction of our committee, includes immigration.
Okay.
So we Republicans have requested over and over and over again hearings on the incredibly sad humanitarian and in many respects, if not all respects, Biden created mess that we have on the border. We've asked for hearings on that. We've not gotten hearings. We've asked to interview the Director of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas. I don't know how many times we've been ignored. I went down to the border, and Brent, I have to tell you, a sadder situation is hard for me to describe, but about 4,000 people a night are presenting at the border, about 4,000, hundreds and hundreds where we visited down near the tip of southern part of Texas. And we went out, we got there at 10 o'clock, we crawled into a big Suburban, and we drove up and down the border until 2 or 3 in the morning, looking at hundreds and hundreds of people coming across and presenting to be fingerprinted. And then about 2/3 are let in to the country, and about 1/3 are sent back. And the 2/3 that are let in are told that many are given a special status, which would allow them to work while they're waiting for their hearing. The hearing is about 3 to 4 years away. That's wow. How these hearings are. And so to say that this is attracting other people to the border would be the understatement of the century. Of course, people in Central America want to come to the United States. Who wouldn't? And they're coming by the hundreds. The anticipation is, and this is a rough number, but by the end of the 4-year Biden administration, about 3.5 million people will have been allowed to come in over the border.
Wow. And just the practice of that many people vetting them or giving them a fair, I mean, it just sheer numbers, it seems like it would be difficult to manage that in any manner.
Well, that's exactly right, and I called that out myself on several occasions during my opportunities to speak, which were numerous. a couple of nights ago now, where I would say, and Mr. Chair, because Jerry Nadler is the chair of Judiciary, I said, Mr. Chair, does anybody here understand how much 8 million is? Because the 8 million people being, I guess legalized is the word for it under this bill, does not include the 3.5 million people being let across the border. Yeah, so I mean, if they are able to obtain fraudulent paperwork, perhaps, but so we've got 8 million people being legalized under this bill, roughly, and we've got 3.5 more million people coming in over the next 3.5 years. And so, how do you get people to understand the impact of these folks on all of our social safety nets and all of our school systems and all of our medical systems? I mean, do people get it? And so our job, and that's why I so much appreciate being on your show, is to call this out and say, hey, this is not good. And by the way, I'm in favor of immigration in the context of a controlled, careful, thoughtful, vetted practice. And I did kind of forget to mention the 120,000 folks from Afghanistan, who, by the way, we owe a debt to many of them, probably not all, but many, for the work they did for us in Afghanistan. So again, the immigration is an important thing where we have a plummeting birth rate in the United States. And we've got to have people that want to do work. And I will share with you, as you well know, many folks from Mexico and Central America work really hard up here, and they're needed. But you can't just throw down the walls and just say, come on, or we'll have about 2 billion more people here, because that's what people want. They want to live in the United States. We've got to have a controlled, careful immigration system, and we don't have one right now.
Yeah, it always amazes me when you have haters in America, and that might be a little bit of extreme, but I mean, you have people that are really critical of the United States and good things come out of examination and so on and so forth. But anyhow, there are some people that genuinely just hate America, but they don't really have any kind of a perspective that, yeah, there are people all over the world, and their entire dream, their entire life has been to get out of wherever they are and get to America. And there's a reason for that. Yeah.
Well, if everybody could go down to the border and look at these folks as they're hiking in, having hiked in basically from Honduras to Nicaragua, Central America, across Mexico, subjected to all kinds of horrible treatment by the cartels. The cartels charge, and I'm quoting the Border Patrol that we met with, the cartels charge $4,000 per person, $4,000, and then they'll guarantee you 4 tries to get into the United States. 4 tries, and then you owe them another $4,000. Most people don't have $4,000, so they enter into a pact with the devil, if you will, of paying the $4,000 after they get to the United States. So these people are basically indentured servants under the threat to their families back in Central America if they don't pay. And we went into various places to meet with various Border Patrol folks, and at one they were showing us pictures. They had kind of blocked some of the more horrid pieces out, but folks that don't do what the cartels they get killed and they have their heads cut off. And so that kind of incentive threat against your family that remains in Central America or Mexico, basically it presents folks with no choice. When they get here, they're going to go earn the money however they can, and they're going to send it back to the cartels. The amount of money the cartels make each night there is around 14 or 15 million bucks. It's in the bill. It's they're basically drugs as more of a sideshow now. It's human trafficking and bringing people to the United States by the thousands, 4,000 people a night.
Wow. So if EOAlive Eastern Oregonians, if you're watching, there are 2 different, and you're commenting, there are 2 different incidences of this program this morning on Facebook. And so if you're commenting, I'm not seeing those comments, make sure that you find the right video and comment on that so that we can see that. Cliff, do you have an idea of, were the border agents able to give you an idea or a perspective of, is this different? How has this been different? How is this situation different than what it has been in the past? Not just during the Trump era, but during the Obama era. Is this, I mean, it sounds horrific. Is it worse?
It is absolutely worse, probably the worst we have seen in the history of the border. And the reason is that the Biden administration has made it clear that they will welcome people here and that they will allow you into the United States while you await your hearing on whether or not you really had to leave and whether or not you're entitled to entry. And so under the Trump administration, you would present at the border and then you would be told to wait in Mexico. So it was the quote, remain in Mexico, end quote, policy, a policy that the Supreme Court just upheld and told the Biden administration that they could not reverse that policy without going through the proper procedures to do so. The Supreme Court did not rule that the policy itself was proper. They ruled on the procedure that the Biden administration avoided when it chose to change that policy. And so that is in litigation now. There were many of my Republican colleagues questioned whether or not the Biden administration was obeying what the United States Supreme Court told it to do. Are they indeed now making those 4,000 people that are presenting every evening wait in Mexico? The answer is, I do not know. I know that right across the border from where we were down at McCarran, on the United States side of the border, there is a city across the border of 1 million people and a huge tent city on the Mexican side of the border where folks wait. And to wait 3 or 4 years in that tent city would be horrific. That sends the signal, however, to those in Central America that you shouldn't come, not just to sit and wait for 3 years in a tent city in Mexico. And so where the conditions are horrid and law enforcement is nil and your safety is, you don't have any safety, you're always at risk. But that policy worked for the Trump administration and for America in the sense that people realized how bad it would be to have to wait in Mexico, and they simply didn't come. They didn't come from Central America knowing they would have to wait in a tent city on the Mexican side of the border. And so this is not my idea. This is the Border Patrol answering the exact question you just asked me when I asked it over and over again in the time that we were down on the border. Does it mean that if we reinstituted that policy, things would change? According to the Border Patrol, yes. That was the only solution they had. And I have to tell you, Brent, there needs to be some real careful thinking on how to manage the border. The wall was a really good idea in the sense that at least there would be a physical barrier there, sending a signal that if you want to come to America, you need to follow the rules. But the wall, we drove up and down it. The gates are wide open, and people have been told that's not quite true. There are holes in the wall that are wide open, and we were told by the Border Patrol that they had been told not to block those openings. And so I think that's probably as good an illustration of the lack of border security that I can come up with right now.
And how, and comparing it to when Obama was in office, how was that? Was the immigration issue the same, or was it? I mean, do you have any comparison there?
Well, I don't think it was the same, but I do know that the Obama administration deported hundreds, if not thousands, of people. And so there was an active effort by the immigration folks to try to remove from the United States those who were violating the law. And so I think the numbers that under his administration that were reported were, again, in the thousands, if not the tens of thousands. One could go check. But so there was the signal that the Obama administration was sending was one of, no, we're not going to facilitate your entry into the United States. We are not. That flipped when the Biden administration took over. And he basically said, yeah, you're welcome. We want you. And so, again, it's a classic case of empathy and sympathy overtaking the needs for security and care and enforcement of the law. And you cannot have a immigration policy if you don't have rules. Otherwise, we'll have another 2 billion people here in the United States.
So then, just to put a really fine point on that, this is something even the Obama administration had a stronger immigration policy, or more of a fence, or more of an obstacle, or a procedure than what the Biden administration has right now.
That's correct.
Okay. So when you, and I'm sure you've had conversations, and I've never had conversations with someone who was like, yeah, the border should be open. Anybody should be able to, I mean, what is the motivation there for people that believe it? Is it sympathy and empathy? Is there, I mean, what is the thought process there that goes into that philosophy? Because personally, I don't know what it is.
Well, I don't either, but because you're talking about the policy that the Biden administration has in place right now.
Okay. Yeah.
So talking about that policy, I don't know what is. I could speculate, and there was much speculation during the hearing on Monday, much speculation by we Republicans as to the motives underlying the Biden administration's current approach to basically an open border policy. There were, just to tell you what's kind of happening, when we drove up that night at, it was dark, of course. We got there at 10, and by the time we got to the border, it was about 11. And we went first to a location under the freeway that goes into one of the major ports of entry between Mexico and the United States. And under that freeway, it was an elevated freeway about 50, 60 feet up off the ground for a mile or so. They were using that as a shelter for the thousands of people that were walking in. As we sat there, people came walking down the road, having passed over the Rio Grande in boats supplied by the cartels. And they would present, to the Border Patrol. They would check in, they would be fingerprinted, and they were sitting in chairs and other things that were there. There were huge pallets of water, and I think they had food there for everybody, and bathrooms and the porta potties, and they had literally hundreds of people there in these kind of very loose enclosures. They're not corrals, but they're roped off areas where everybody was supposed to sit. And then they would come up, and in their hand they would have a plastic bag that they'd been told to bring with them, and in that plastic bag would be their birth certificate. And then they would be checked in, if you will, and if they met certain standards, if they were under 18 or if they were a parent with a child under 6, then they were going to be allowed into the United States, and then they were told that they would be contacted when their time for their asylum hearing came up 3 or 4 years from now. And then they would be put on airplanes and flown to different points around the United States. When I asked where, the Border Patrol said that's not up to them. It was being handled by Homeland Security, and the people would be bused from under this freeway to these huge tents that are located several miles away. And the buses run constantly. They were loading up with folks as we were leaving. Some of the buses, about a third of the people go back to Mexico, where the people, they didn't make the standards, so they're offloaded and they try again the next night, I guess, or maybe they go outside that space and come in without presenting. And that whole process is some people were saying was designed to put people around the United States that would then vote Democrat. And now, did those who are making that assertion have any proof of that? None that I'm aware of, but those arguments were being made. But there is no doubt about the truth of this. When we got to the airport, flying back to Dallas, before we flew back to DC, there were literally dozens, if not hundreds, of little kids wearing little lanyards around their neck with a little sheet that says, "I don't speak English. Please get me to wherever they were going, Denver, Minnesota, Portland, wherever they were going." And so they were basically instructions written out to try to help them get where they were going. I think there were about 30 of those little kids on our airplane.
Wow. And what a mess. And you can't blame the kids. You can't blame you know what I mean? I guess what what I'm wondering is what is so fearful wherever they're coming from, and you might not know this. What is so fearful for wherever they're coming from that they're willing to enter into the possible horrific things that can happen with the cartel? Seems like they're going from one devil to another devil. I mean, what is motivating them to do this? I mean, do you have any help? I mean, do you have any understanding of what's going on in the minds of those folks that are seeking?
Well, only to the extent that I've read in getting ready for this hearing. I spent hour upon hour upon hour upon hour trying to find articles and other materials that would answer that kind of question. And so one of the articles that I read suggested that the people that were coming here, of course, many times were economically motivated because the job situation in Central America is horrid. There are no jobs in Central America. And so, at least for the folks, the younger people, the unemployment rate is 20, 30%. I mean, it's really bad. And so if they can come from Central America where there is no job, or if there is a job, it pays almost nothing, and then go to work here in the United States for $15 an hour, it's like moving. I mean, you move from hopelessness economically to real hope. And one of the things I've tried to point out to people that is, I think, many times overlooked is the exchange rate between Mexico and the United States. The exchange rate is about 20 to 1.
Wow.
And so for every $1 American dollar, you could get 20 pesos. And so if you get a job in the United States and send your money back home to your mom or your dad or your wife or your husband, whoever's remaining, they instantly can take those dollars you've used in America, and they're worth 10 times more now that they have those dollars in Mexico. The same thing is true in Central America. So if you can get somebody in your family up to the United States working for this kind of money, and they send money back, and they do, because they care for their families just like we do, then all of a sudden there is economic hope. So that's one reason. The other, many people are subjected to horrible things. And when you see these young girls and kids with kids, is the way I'm going to say it, it is truly, truly shocking and sad. So but the challenge we've got to address is that there are many hundreds of thousands of people in that same situation across South America and Central America and frankly the world. And by the way, Brent, the folks that are coming across the border are not just people from Central America, although that's the highest percentage. They are people from, I think, 80 different countries, I think is what Border Patrol told us. So right now, if you want to come to America and you can't get in, go to Mexico and pay the cartel $4,000 and come across the border.
Wow.
And that's what's happening.
Wow. Okay. Well, we didn't know exactly where the conversation was going to go. And so this is a really good peek into that. And frankly, I don't know anybody who's been to the border. And so thank you for doing that and helping us with that. Let's pivot just a little bit. Let's talk about COVID, and specifically the COVID mandate, the President Biden mandate, and how, I mean, people, and again, our state, as you know, is, I mean, there are people that are jumping up and down because they're excited about the mandate. And then there are other people that, I mean, they're frankly fearful. I have friends, they're fearful of losing their jobs. They're fearful of, is my religious exemption going to be considered? So I don't know. Talk about that a little bit. Kind of tell us where that's at.
Yeah. Well, I've learned one thing, Brent, in this job, and there's not much room for equivocation or lack of clarity. So let me state a couple of things about my position on the broad issue.
Okay.
First, the vaccines are a good thing. And I say that because I sometimes find that you need to state the obvious. But my mom, bless her heart, passed away from complications from polio because she was born before they had the vaccine, and she got polio, and she died because she could not swallow. It had ultimately affected her ability. So she spent the last 3 years of her life basically bedridden and incapable of swallowing. So I know the horror of polio firsthand. So I understand the value of vaccine. I truly do. What I try to do, and in this, before I leave that, I also oppose the mandate. So 2 things. I understand the value of vaccine. I oppose the mandate. So in the context of President Biden, he should not have mandated what he did. First of all, I don't think he has the legal authority to do so. I thought Governor Kristi Noem in South Dakota put it pretty well, where she said, "See you in court." I think that's what she tweeted after the mandate was publicized, or people learned about it. And I think that's kind of the attitude of many people in my district. It's basically, you're not the boss of me, Mr. President. You can't tell me what to do, and you shouldn't be trying to take away my job to try to force me to do something that I should have the power to decide whether I want to do or not. What I fear is that as so often is the case, if somebody tells you to do something, you become less likely to do it. You basically say, well, we don't think this is really about vaccines. It's really about you trying to control us and
Right.
government from the top down, and we don't have any time for that. And I don't blame anybody for that attitude. But I would say, and I've said it literally dozens of times over the past 6 months, one of President Trump's greatest triumphs was speedily getting the vaccine, and millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people now have had an opportunity to take advantage of that and be safer as a result thereof. To me, people need to make their own decision, and they need to ask themselves how much risk they want to take. And then, and to answer that question is very difficult now, because there's so many sources of information, so many conflicting opinions. I mean, you can go online and in literally 5 minutes have any number of different people telling you what to do. And so finding someone that you trust, and it's not a politician, I'll tell you that right now. It's not me. It's your doctor or your other trusted confidant, somebody you truly trust, because you are talking about something that is extraordinarily serious, and something that right now, even in La Grande, I think you have the National Guard there now. I think there are 10 National Guard folk helping at the hospital. There are National Guard folk that have been put out in any number of Eastern Oregon cities to help the hospitals. I was asked by the hospitals to try to find more people to help them, because their nurses and doctors are wearing out. And again, people say, well, it's not that many. Well, it doesn't take very many when you have a small hospital. And that's what we have in Eastern Oregon, right? In Southern Oregon, we don't have massive hospitals. Although the one in St. Charles and also down in Medford, Asante, they both called me and said, would you please get us some help? And so the National Guard, thank goodness, is there to step up and help, because it's really challenging right now. Now, to get back to your question of what should people do, talk to your trusted folk, find out what they suggest you do, and then recognize that you can reduce your risk if you choose to get vaccinated. That much is true. And so the rest of it, what the risks are for you taking the vaccine and all that, talk to a doctor.
So, and we've talked a lot. I mean, it's such a hot topic. We've talked a lot about COVID. We're going to be talking about it more. We've had a couple of town halls. We had a town hall with the hospital here a couple of weeks ago, and 4 or 5 of their physicians, and the city of La Grande is going to have a similar town hall a couple of weeks from now. So, and just for those that again sometimes criticize us for not doing both sides, don't forget that over the last year we've done over 30 half-hour sessions with the local CHD to talk about COVID. So, but how? I guess let's talk about presidential power, because occasionally, I mean, and you see it on both sides. You see somebody who's a senator 4 years or, a few years before they're running for president, they say, that other president doesn't have the authority to do that. And then, or they'll get into office and say, and President Biden is in that position. It's like, no, we would never mandate, we'll never mandate mandates. We'll never mandate vaccinations. And here we are. How does that happen? I guess, and the really end question is, and I asked this question of an attorney that was on with me Tuesday, how is that corrected? How does someone, so the governor that said, see you in court, the court takes a long time. And in the meantime, the president can enforce, I don't know, that it just seems like there's really an undue burden that while that unwinds itself, you have all of that stuff that precedes. I don't know.
Okay, well, I think your question raises the point of how self-government works, and we don't have a dictator, thank goodness, in charge of America. Although I think President Biden is trying to dictate, if you will, through his mandates, what he wants done, and we don't respond well to that. We don't. Now, and I say we, I'm talking about everybody. Frankly, you might respond better to President Biden's mandate if you agree with him. But if you didn't, then you just hop over to the other side. And we've seen it, as we all know, over the past administrations. And part of the issue is driven by the incredible communication systems we now have, like you and I are using right now, right? Because 30 years ago, you go read the newspaper, right? You talk about delay, and now it's instantaneous. Everything that's being done within seconds after it happens. And so people begin to expect or want equal speed when it comes to our systems that try to allow us as a self-governing nation to work things out. And our systems are very, very, the one that I know everybody in LeGrand is familiar with is the forest policy. Good grief, you want a lesson in frustration. Try to get a logging show put together somewhere around LeGrand. Good luck with that. It's going to take years and years and years. And some people are very happy for the delay, those on the environmental side of things. And those of us who recognize the danger they're putting us all in with ever-increasing amounts of wood up in the forest are equally upset about the delay. But the point is, we're a self-governing nation, and we've got these systems that do their best to allow us to govern ourselves slowly, as everybody has their say. And by the time everybody has their say, as you know, the old saying, everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. And that's exactly where we find ourselves on most of these issues. But at the end of the day, even the best, we have to take great satisfaction in having systems that allow people to come in and all argue their side of it. But I still remember back when I first got in the Oregon legislature and I was making a really passionate speech about water rights. And of course, I was outnumbered, as I always was in Salem. Never a day in the majority, 12 years in the legislature. And I finally kind of wound down, and the chair of the committee, a Democrat, said, "Well, thank you for that, Mr. Bentz. Now we're going to vote." And I realized we were done. I was done. And because guess what? We have a system that runs with whoever has the most votes. What I tell people is, look, there are all kinds of levels of accountability. You can make a list of them. I did one time when I was trying to show people, they were saying, well, we're just not heard. I go, you have more ways to be heard than anybody in the history of the world. Let's just go over a few of them. In 3.5 years, Joe Biden will be up for re-election. Actually, it's going to start sooner than that. In just a year and 2 months, I'll be up for re-election because I plan on running again. We're waiting to see what the redistricting does to see where I'm running, to represent. But so we have the courts. So we've got the president that's going to be accountable. We've got the congressmen and women that are accountable. We've got our U.S. senators that are accountable, and we've got our courts. And we have the ability to protest and get out there and make loud noises, just like people that appear on your show, and try to change people's opinions. What I see happening, Randy, is not a good thing, is people thinking that they can use force to get their point across. No. Or this critical race theory, this new, you hear a lot about it. Their thought is, at its heart, to tear down our systems and throw them away. And you go, really? I remember that was called the French Revolution, where everybody ended up dead. I said, I don't think we want that. So the point is, I'm all about refining, improving our systems to get people more involved. And instead of just spending your time complaining, run for the school board. That's what I just tell people.
Yeah. I see it. I mean, I see it on both sides. So we've seen kind of the viciousness on the left, that particularly that kind of emerged during the Trump era, because people were so divided and opposed to President Trump. But now I'm seeing the viciousness on the right too, and it's not the cancel culture, and it's not any more attractive. In fact, I commented the other day on a Facebook comment, which I seldom do, and I said, this isn't attractive on either side. And these leaders, our school board members, our hospital board members, our commissioners, they're people, they're us, they're our neighbors, they're people just like us. And treat those leaders the way that you would want to be, because you very well may be one of those leaders in the future. And it is just, I just see this awfulness that kind of ekes out of people. Okay, let's shift to one more thing. Talk a little, because it's huge, and that is the voting elections. I mean, there's some big stuff that's kind of boiling, and it's hard for us to sort out. I mean, in Oregon, as you know, we've been doing mail ballots for a long time, so most Oregonians don't have any opposition to that. But what is happening on a national level with the elections? There's a bill that we hear is being pushed through that will kind of nationalize some of that stuff. And I don't know, maybe speak about that a little bit, if you would.
Right. I think you're talking about HR 1, which I absolutely, totally oppose. And then there's HR 5, which I also absolutely oppose. And then there are the efforts in various states to try to make more clear, I think is the word I would use. Others on the Democrat side would say they're all these efforts to try to make your voting systems work better are just designed, according to the Democrats, to make it harder to vote. And so the key here, frankly, is to make sure that people believe in their system of elections. And again, to those who are unhappy with how our system of elections work in Oregon, I strongly recommend you go down on election night and watch the county clerk and the teams of folks that they have available to count the votes. Watch those people, not because they need to be watched, but because you'll be so impressed at how hard they work to try to get it right. And most of them have been doing it literally for tens of years. And they're wonderful people, and they take enormous pride in getting things right. So and people will come in and make many excuses or other arguments. And the main thing I would say is get involved. Go down, if you have questions, go down and chase down the facts. No system is perfect. There is no doubt when the 150 million votes were cast in the last presidential election, there is no doubt whatsoever that some of those votes were not legal votes. There is no doubt. Out of 170 million, of course there's going to be irregularities, is the word you hear. The best we can do is do our best in each of our little spaces to make sure that our part of the system is working correctly. And by the way, HR 1, the Democrat bill to take over and make federal all elections, and by the way, also put huge tens of billions of dollars into elections, because they would match, I think, any I thought any gift under $200 they'll match. I forgot 7 times or something. It's a crazy system of shifting the cost of elections over to the taxpayer. There's so many things that are bad with that bill. I put together a notebook, Brent. This is one of my notebooks here. I got about a dozen of them on the desk. And what I try to do is break down the issues into different pieces. I have HR1 right here. There it is, HR1. And so I could bore you for an hour, literally, on this stuff. And by the way, before we run out of time, I want to mention I'll be driving through the Grand this afternoon on my way to the Pendleton Roundup. I'll be at some sort of a meeting early in the morning at 7 in Pendleton, then the Cowboy Breakfast at 8, and then I'll be riding a horse in the parade. And by the way, I grew up on a ranch. I know all about horses. I hope they get me one that's named Daisy May and not Sparkplug, or I mean, who knows? But again, I digress. I just want to say, get involved in your election process.
Good. So real quick, you've been busy. You've done, and again, my staff member, Alex McCad, had put together a thing, and he called it Cliff Notes. That's what the subject was when he sent it to me, because I said, well, I need something to make me look a little brighter than what I am. Can you send me something, you've done 11 town halls in August. You've probably done more than that. It looks like, one of the things that you've done, which is kind of your specialty, is resources and water, and somewhere along the line, you were able to kind of reallocate or encourage some COVID funds to help relieve some of the grass seed growers. I don't know, maybe just give us a little thumbnail of some of the things that you feel good about over the last few months that you've been able to affect.
Well, what I feel best about is having a staff that's just superb at what they do. And then I get to come in and take credit for it. But I'll just say that on the grass seed deal, that's a result of Paulette Pyle, who's I'm so fortunate is helping us out. She's part of our staff here in the Ontario office. She and her husband live over in Idaho, and she comes over to work every day. And she was the one that was able to ultimately take some of the arguments we discussed in the office and put them to work to open the door to funding for those who had lost money during the COVID situation, raising Kentucky bluegrass seed. So it sounds so boring, but it's huge to those producers, huge in what's turning out to be a really bad drought year. On the water side of things, we are working all over the state, but with a focus upon the Klamath and upon the Deschutes and upon Harney Basin and upon a little bit of work up in the Hermiston area, where we're trying to figure out different ways to help with water storage and with water conservation and anything we can do to try to help folks in this period of drought. My little farm here, I have 120 acres under the Owyhee Reservoir that I lease out to farmers. We were cut back on our water this year. Thank goodness we had some, and they were able to raise some onions and some beans and some wheat and on my place. But they did not have enough water. And so next year, we're out of water now. The Owyhee Reservoir is basically empty. And so, at least for purposes of irrigation. So how do we make it rain? And I'll tell you, the Congress isn't good at most things, and it's really bad at making it rain. At least maybe on the eastern United States, they've got more. They can't get rid of their water. They're drowning in it. Literally, they're drowning in it. And we don't have any. And so I have been working. Thank goodness I'm ranking member of Water, Oceans, and Wildlife, position almost unheard of for a freshman, but I'm a water expert. I know it, and I know that space. And I've been working with the Democrat chair literally to try to put together a bill to try to address some of these long-term water-related issues. And then on the judiciary side of things, I was very fortunate to be put on that committee, and I've been working to try to address such things as Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft and Google, and whether or not they are monopolies. And so we're working in that space. That is now branching out into other spaces such as meat packing, and there's some discussion about other areas. That's super interesting, and I think we'll be able to do something there to help. And what I've tried to do with folks when given this opportunity is to say, look, if you have a federal issue, I have 16 people that work for me full time. and some others part-time, please call our office. And we're still looking to try to establish an office along the freeway corridor between Ontario and Hood River. We've been kind of waiting to see what happens to us in redistricting, and I guess we'll find out on Monday in general what the legislature is planning on doing, or maybe even today. I'm not sure. But the main thing is, if you have a federal issue, and you want help, contact our office.
Good. Well, Cliff, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and have fun at the Pendleton Roundup. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you being able to come on and just kind of talk about a variety of topics. So, and appreciate you representing us.
You're very kind, and I can't tell you how wonderful it is to have an opportunity to talk to people in my district. And I do hope we can get back to a point where people are not having to wear masks anymore, and we can get past this COVID challenge that everybody's facing, and move on with. There's so many other problems that deserve our attention. So thank you so much. It's been great to be on your show.
Yeah. All right. We will talk to you soon.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, hey, thank you, Eastern Oregon. That was interesting, and it's always a delight to talk with Cliff. And I can just tell you that he's a wonderful person. I mean, you might not agree with everything he says or appreciate him, but I can tell you that he genuinely cares about Oregon. He genuinely cares about people, and he is a genuine East Oregonian, and that is just really wonderful that we have access to him. All right. Well, hey, so just upcoming tomorrow night, 7:00, there's going to be a LeGrand High School game that'll be streamed live here. And then, of course, hopefully Kyle will be with me, and we'll be back next Tuesday right here on AM on EOAlive. Your connection to Eastern Oregon. Thanks so much.